call the meeting to order, Legislative Committee, and we will go through our usual reports. We have everybody online, apparently. Come up is update on the federal legislation. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Can you all hear me? Okay. I think maybe first thing we need to do is a roll call.
Jeanette, roll call.
Mayor Mitchell,
Yes, here.
Councilmember Buscaino,
Good morning. Yes.
Supervisor Rutherford,
I'm here.
and Supervisor. Oh, just
There he is.
Oh, good timing.
perfect timing.
Okay.
Perfect.
You want to just confirm, Jeanette?
Supervisor Perez for attendance.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. And we will proceed with the federal update. The first is from Cassidy and Associates. And the first one is Carmen. And we have Gary Hoitzma on the phone. Gary, good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Glad to be here again. Really don't have a lot of updates from our written report this time, but just want to mention, very happy to see you and Wayne and the whole South Coast team here in Washington last week. We had some very productive meetings, particularly from our side with the some of the business groups that have been very helpful to us on the ultra low NOx rulemaking, and thought those went very well there in Washington last week. So with that, I'd just be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you, Gary, for setting up those meetings last week. They were very productive. We're very thankful for your service. Are there any questions for Gary Hoitzma? Seeing none, we'll move on to
a public comment.
so we have, do we have public comment? I think, Barbara, I'm going to need some. Oh, is there public comment? And should we go through all the federal and then have public comment, or and then through the state and have public comment? How would you want to proceed on this?
Can you tell us which item did you want to make?
1 and 2, the federal
On number
reports on
1?
federal legislation.
After
Here.
So let's-
State legislation.
Okay, so we'll do the federal and state, and then we'll take your comment.
All right.
Thank you.
So we'll go to the federal reports, and then we can hear from Mr. Eder then, or is that how you want to proceed? And then at the state, and then hear from Mr. Eder again.
Yes,
Yes.
Madam Chair.
All right. I'm going to call on Amelia Jenkins from Cassidy and Associates next. Amelia, can you give us any updates that are not in your written report?
Hi, Mayor. This is actually Caleb representing Cassidy and Associates today. We have just a few small updates. One is that just wanted to make sure everyone saw that last week Andrew Wheeler was confirmed as the administrator for the EPA on a party line vote. The second item is just for upcoming scheduling that the House leadership has reserved floor time for an infrastructure package in the late spring. So that is something that we'll work with SCAQMD staff on to prepare our request and priorities for the infrastructure package that will be coming together. And finally, our team here has been working with Congressman Mike Levin on scheduling a field hearing for the new climate change committee in the House at South Coast AQMD. And so we'll be working with Wayne and staff on confirming those details.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Madam Chair, if I could just add, I spoke to Congressman Levin this morning, and he's very excited about having the opportunity to work with us on air quality, on energy, and on climate issues and the nexus between all of them.
Great, that is good news. So it was interesting to meet with a number of our Congress people last week, and there's a number of new ones out there. So we got a chance to meet with the new people, which was very productive as well. So I'll move on to the next report. This comes from Cadiz Associates, and Mark, I believe, is on the phone. Good morning, Mark.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. My brief report, I think everyone knows that the President's budget is due out in what they're calling the skinny form next week, and with more details the week after that. So we'll obviously be following all of our appropriations priorities. And we've been working with Derek and Lisa and the rest of the team as members have starting to put out their appropriations request submission deadlines, and so some have already occurred and some are coming up. So we're working with the staff to make sure that all of our appropriations deadlines are met. So that's my report. And I just also want to say, as the others did, that I thought it was a very helpful trip out by the board and the staff, and very helpful.
Great, thank you, Mark, and we thank all of the consultants for all the work they did to put that trip together and help us schedule appointments, and so it was a very useful trip. Now that concludes the federal. Should we ask for public at this time, or should I state first?
We'll have him comment on the federal portion.
Okay, then. Is there any public comment on the federal portion? I see we have Mr. Etter coming forward. Good morning.
Madam Chair. Madam
And how much time? Someone there going to keep time, please. How much time are we allowing Mr. Etter?
Madam Chair, there's a number of items, 5 items, and so it would be the chair's prerogative if you wanted to limit him to public comment period of 3 minutes for all items, but I'll leave that to your prerogative.
That has been the policy, right? 3 minutes.
Generally, it's similar to what we do with the governing board.
Right. So, Mr. Etter will maybe, how many items does he want to speak on? So we know how many minutes to give him on this one.
Harvey, do you know how many items you want to speak on?
I want to speak on 1 and 2. I'm just looking at 3, 4, well, I'm not familiar with these other items.
So 1 and 2?
Yeah.
Right.
But on 5, I see there's part of the transportation plan.
So, Madam Chair, it seems as if Mr. Ed would like to speak on items 1, 2, and perhaps 5. And so if we give you, Harvey, 3 minutes for all 5, you want us to track it, or how do you want to do it?
Well, shall I just do 2 now and leave 1?
Well, we're on 1 now, so you
We're
can
on
do 1.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you want.
I'd suggest maybe 1 minute on each.
Yeah, okay.
And then if you are shorter than that, we'll just keep it at a 0 sum.
But this is being done under protest, violation of our civil rights. And it's happening at all levels of government and whatnot, and it's got to be stopped.
Okay, so Mr. Etter, you're going to speak on the federal update, and we'll have 1 minute.
Okay. All right. On the federal update, history that the Solar New Deal was part of our comments and in the record about 40 exhibits on the 16 plan. Now we have federal the Green New Deal. So this has a lot. You know, I heard Cortez say, you know, other generations didn't do anything 40, 50 years. Just some stuff's been done. They should look at this, and the district needs, this is like implementing that here in the district and statewide. Now, there have been in the past for solar energy refundable tax credits that if you don't have, can't use the credits, that you can get money back. So in federal legislation, this needs to be done right now with the existing federal tax credits. It's very important, and it has to be also done in with low-income housing, that there's, big tax credits for that, 70, 80, 90%, and that has to be leveraged and going for low-income solar equity, and that's part of what we put in the record, and everything else is included here by reference. The low-income solar equity program, which staff had for 6 months and then ignored, didn't do anything about.
Mr. Etter, your minute is up.
That's
So-
my minute, right?
Yeah.
So I guess it down.
It is, okay. Now we have reports from our state consultants. And the first of those is Quintana Watson Hartman, and we have Katie Maples with us for that particular report. Katie, are you online? Good
Yes,
morning.
good morning.
Good morning.
So not a whole lot to update from, in addition to our written report. I just wanted to note that the bill introduction deadline was after the report was sent. And so at the time, there was about 1,847 bills that were introduced. Now in total, there are 2,621. So definitely a lot going on and a lot to track in the legislature. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Thank you. We'll move on to next one is California Advisors. We have Ross Buckley online. Good morning, Ross. Any update to your report?
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just piggybacking off of what Katie mentioned about the over 2,600 bills being introduced, just for that comparison's sake, that's our record number of bills. Only 2,100 bills were introduced last year, so that's a 500 bill increase this year. So lots of bills out there. I had it in my written report, but on March 18th, there's a confirmed informational hearing that the Assembly Natural Resources Committee is holding on the AB 617 implementation program. And then in the past couple of weeks, we've worked with SCAQMD staff to set up meetings here in Sacramento to talk about legislation. I think those meetings have gone very successfully. And that's it for my report. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ross. Any questions? Seeing none, we will go on to Gonzalez and Sons, and I believe Paul is on the phone this morning. Good morning, Paul. Any update to your report?
Good morning, Madam
please?
Chair. Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. I just have a quick update, and in addition to my written report. On February 27th, they held their most recent cap and trade revenue auction. All 80 million allowances sold at $15.73 per auction, which is about 11 cents over the floor price. This equals about 850 million for the state's GDRF fund, which of course we will be working closely with the legislature and the governor on to during the budget process to ensure that we funnel as much of those funds down south to the district as possible. The next auctions are going to be in May, August, and November of this year, and it's looking like we're going to be seeing about 800 to 900 million out of each of those auctions. So, with the legislature having their authority to allocate 40% of those funds to whatever they'd like to do, we'll be working very closely with them through that process, and we'll continue to keep you up to speed as those negotiations continue. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Okay. Thank you, Paul. Next, we are going to receive an update on the voting district authorization proposal, and I believe Philip Crabb is going to give us that update. Philip, good morning.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Before we proceed, I think there was a public comment on item number 2.
Right, we have a public comment from Mr. Etter again. Sorry.
That's correct.
And Mr. Etter will have 1 minute on this item. Is that correct? Yes.
Hello, I'm Harvey Etter, speaking for myself and for the Public Solar Power Coalition and all like-minded folks. There's climate action plans, and this needs to be required by every locality and city and whatnot. And they have to use the real numbers, which not what the district and CARB's using of about 450 parts per million CO2 equivalent. The real numbers with methane, et cetera, of about 900 right now. And it was, information and comments to the plan and whatnot. Also, these tax credits for refundable can be worked in the state if we can't get them in the fund. There's some kind of fund to facilitate this. And also with housing, that Section 8, there's the option to buy. It's been in the law for 20 years. I know, like in the city of LA, Weston was saying homeless is a disgrace. They could have talked to the guys for 10, 20 cents on the dollar instead of the 1% and the banks and the insurance companies.
Thanks, Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Etter. Thank you. And now we'll go to Philip on the report for the voting district authorization.
Yes, good morning. Sure. Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. I'll only provide a brief update, but we do have an author for the bill. That's Senator Ben Allen, and a spot bill was introduced, SB 732, but it currently has no substantive content. However, we recently submitted a new, more refined and streamlined version of the bill language to Legislative Council in Sacramento. Staff was also in Sacramento earlier this week to meet with Senator Allen. We're also continuing to actively communicate with electeds and with a wide spectrum of interested stakeholders regarding this effort in order to educate and firm up support on the bill. And along those lines, we received feedback from various stakeholders regarding the tax caps issue. It's important to make clear that any potential future funding measures under this bill would be exempt from any sales tax cap and would preserve existing tax cap space for cities, counties, and transportation agencies, etc.
Thank you, Philip.
Good job, Paul.
That's great. Okay. Anything else? I'll give you it.
I yield my time.
Okay, are there any questions for Philip on the progress on this measure? Yes, I think Supervisor Rutherford.
I have some questions. Could you talk a little bit more about the cap exemption? That's the first I'm hearing from this. Does that come from the senator, from other feedback we're getting, from our staff? Is that, are they changing state law to just get rid of the cap, or it's specifically exempting this?
So we've heard feedback from the localities in particular. There's a number of folks that have run their own tax cap measures, whether it be a city or county or transportation agency. So that's a lot of the feedback we've got from a varied amount of stakeholders. So this is something that other bills have done at times. It's basically to allow for an even application of any future funding measure that might occur.
So if I could add, this particular provision does not change the cap statewide, but what it does say is if a tax is ultimately brought to the voters and enacted under this legislation, it will not detract from the existing cap. So if your jurisdiction has 1% left and we adopt a half-cent tax, you'll still have a 1% left for your local jurisdiction.
Do you have examples of other taxes that are also exempt like that?
Metro.
Yeah, there was a bill, SB 767 by De Leon, that was run by LA Metro. I believe it was for Measure R, Measure M, and there was an exemption in there with respect to the cap as well. It's something that's been done in past bills.
And just a brief answer as to why the language wasn't included when it was introduced.
It's pretty common to have, in fact, a number of those 2,600 bills that have been introduced, there's a good number that are spot bills. Maybe the language isn't fully ready yet, so you meet the deadline, and then you go ahead and amend within 30 days, basically, to put the substantive language in.
I know what a spot bill is. I'm asking why we didn't have language ready. Was our language just not liked by the author?
So the original language was not liked by most electeds that we saw, and they asked that we incorporate a number of changes. And so we've really been reaching out to a number of COGs and cities and other organizations, and this cap was one of the key points that was made to us, that a number of cities wanted to move their own sales tax measure in 2020. They were fearful that this would impact it, and that was there something else that could be done. We looked to LA Metro as setting the example for that. We're hopeful that this change, although I'm not sure I'd call it a change since we haven't actually come out with the language, but the constant modifications, the constant feedback have evolved on terms of the language that we're going to be putting forward. And so that's what was submitted most recently to Ledge Council, and I think that was last night.
Do we have any co-authors at this point?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any other
Madam
questions?
Chair?
Yes, Supervisor. Supervisor Perez, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As far as the cap, and I appreciate the questions as well of Supervisor Rutherford, I think it's going to be important that we launch an education campaign, as I'm sure you're thinking about already, to all our entities throughout the district, because there is a fear that there is a cap and that it's going to have some sort of impact on their cities. Just here at the Coachella Association of Governments, right, I believe we had a couple folks not too long ago, I can't remember who came down, but that was one of the concerns that was brought up by a few cities. Well, they raised the questions there in public or even internally as they raised the questions to me. And so let's just make sure we prepare for that and launch that type of education, because that's going to be necessary. I also think that we need to have that language ready to go and prepared. If we're using Metropolitan as the example, let's make sure that we have that and provide that information to those cities. That way they have something to reference. Aside from that, I'm wondering, have we received any opposition or ideas on language or amendments from folks? And I guess in this case, I'm also referring to Riverside County Transportation Commission, because I know on that level there were some concerns. And so I'm wondering if, I know that we reached out to them as a district to RCTC, but I'm wondering, as a result of reaching out to them, has there been discussions on potential language or what their concerns were, and are we addressing those concerns?
Yeah, no, they did come to a previous legislative committee meeting, and in fact, when we went out to the CBAG meeting, we spoke with members as well and over the phone. So I know that their concerns were dealing with affecting a future tax measure with regard to the area for RCTC, specifically on this tax cap issue, 2/3 vote, things like that. So we definitely been in communication and will continue to be to try to work out. I think they had a legislative platform that they adjusted with respect to this type of measure or multi-district measure.
But when you had that conversation, I guess what I'm asking is, were they specific to what their concerns were? Had they already highlighted certain issues, certain areas for us to work on already? Because we don't want to wait. We want to make sure we take care of this early. If we wait and issues come up later, it's just going to make it more difficult.
Yes, no, they were specific, and again, it was going towards the voting requirements, potential impact on future ballot measures, consultation before and after the measure, a potential measure would be done, things like that. So we definitely have specifics, and we are going to continue working with them on those issues.
When you all went to Sacramento, what was the feel around this issue with other legislators? Did you have this conversation with other legislators, or only Senator Allen?
No, we spoke with other legislators, Supervisor, and I would say that we've tried to address the concerns as we've heard them, and that's the reason that we've seen the evolution of this language. And I would say that the biggest concern that we heard, aside from the voting district frame, was the cap, and there was a lot of concern about that. That's why this latest iteration that was just submitted to Ledge Council addresses the cap, and we hope addresses the concerns that we've heard from many of the COGs and cities about having the undesirable effect of adversely impacting their own measures in either this year or the next year. So by exempting it and making sure that it doesn't apply to the cap, we think that we've addressed their concerns. But we're continuing to reach out and to meet with these groups. So I recently met with the LA County Chamber, and I just met with them again this week, and we talked about these, and it seems thus far, and we're continuing, as I said, reaching out again to say these are the things that we've changed. I would say that there seems to be support for that. In discussions with other electeds in Sacramento, there was a general nod that yes, okay, that's good. You still need to drum up other support among locals for them. So for instance, Senator Allen wanted to hear from some of the local LA County officials and LA City officials. And we know that some of the supervisors have already reached out to Senator Stern, Senator Allen, and to others, but we're continuing to try to build that support for this measure.
Yeah, I can appreciate that, and quite frankly, the language will come in time. I get that. Being proactive is a good thing, and regardless, even if addressing those concerns, it doesn't mean that we're going to still gain folks' support. Right? At the end of the day, there's going to be competing interests. Yep. And especially with locals at the city level, there's going to be some entities that are going to say, well, listen, because we have our own tax measure, we feel that that's going to hurt us. Even if we decide to be proactive, even if we educate, even if we go out there and make some changes and have language that makes better sense for people, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. People are still going to take their side. So I'm just saying, as long as we're proactive, we're communicating, we're educating, we do everything we can possible, that's only going to bring about wider appeal at the end of the day. So just continue doing that. I think it'd be helpful for everybody. And just so that you all know, obviously, as far as I'm concerned, for me, I don't know where I am on this issue yet. Even though I'm on the district, I'm also up with RCTC. So I'm truly trying to just make sure that we build our case on this front. And while I'm on RCTC, trying to figure out what we can do there, what I can do there to see if there's a compromise eventually. And so, obviously more to come. And I do look forward to the cost-benefit analysis that will come forward once this bill is printed, right? And get that information from the LAO or legal counsel up in Sacramento. And I think that would be helpful as well in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? I will comment that I have primarily experienced opposition from cities because of the cap issue. But the other point I think that we should be thinking about is that if we don't meet the federal requirements by 2023 and 2031, there is the possibility of losing federal transportation funding. So to the extent that we have transportation commissions that are concerned about this, that's another concern I think that we ought to be raising, that we could actually lose transportation funding, the federal transportation funding, and that would certainly impact what we do here in the region with our transportation dollars. So just want to raise that as well. Yeah, I've heard there's an editorial in the Daily Breeze this morning that was opposing the imposition of a tax to benefit the South Coast District. So there's already a lot of movement going on this, and I think Supervisor Perez is absolutely correct that we need to do proper outreach to see what kind of support there is for it, because I think we will see some opposition from various sectors. So any other questions? Any public comment on this? Okay, we'll move on to an update on, from Lisa Tanaka O'Malley on the potential congressional field hearings. This is an idea that came up last week when we were in Washington. So I believe Lisa is sitting there at the table. Good morning, Lisa.
Chairman, members of the board. I will keep this very brief as we spoke about this earlier in our federal reports and Wayne reported on it. But on February 25th through the 27th, our legislative committee chairman, Mayor Judy Mitchell, and governing board members Mayor Larry McCallum and Council Member Dwight Robinson were in Washington, D.C. with executive council members and staff to meet with members of Congress, committees, business, and other stakeholders. The meetings went very well, and we received a lot of interest from congressional committees on the Senate and House side in potential field hearings. They were particularly interested because South Coast SCAQMD, as we know, is in extreme and severe non-attainment, and we have done so much with technology and innovative solutions. So we are very excited and hopeful to pursue the opportunity to have a field hearing. It will give us an opportunity to highlight South Coast SCAQMD's efforts and accomplishments and future challenges, as well as it will give us an opportunity to position ourselves in future legislative discussions. As we heard, hopefully there'll be a transportation bill and other measures in which we would like to be active in. With that, I take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Lisa on this issue? And is there any public comment there?
None.
None. All right. We'll move on to, we have some action items on positions on state bills. The first of those is Senate Bill 210 by Connie Leva. And I think Philip is going to give us the report on that.
Yes. This bill, SB 210, would authorize CARB to adopt and implement a smog check requirement for heavy-duty non-gasoline trucks by modernizing emission control and enforcement through a comprehensive inspection and maintenance program. So personal passenger vehicles have been required to undergo regular smog checks for decades. However, current law does not require heavy-duty diesel vehicles to have smog inspections to ensure that their emission control systems are working properly. So this bill would enhance compliance and ensure a more even playing field for those maintaining their vehicle emissions systems in a proper way. This bill is aligned with SCAQMD's priorities regarding reducing criteria pollutant and toxic emissions and protecting public health within the South Coast. It would also promote increased production of near zero and zero emission heavy duty vehicles in the South Coast and facilitate attainment of federal air quality standards. So staff is recommending a support position on this bill, but I'd like to note that staff would like to suggest working with the author on a couple of adjustments to the bill. First is to better establish which vehicles are regulated under the bill's terminology of non-gasoline heavy-duty on-road motor vehicles, just to clarify that zero-emission vehicles are exempt from any new smog check program. And also, staff recommends that penalty monies collected as part of the program be designated to assist local air districts in mitigating heavy-duty truck emissions.
Thank you. Any questions on this?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Supervisor Perez.
Are you aware of any opposition on this item?
I'm not aware myself. I know that the author has been working collaboratively, and they tried this bill last year, shelved it, and came back this year and been working with agencies and truckers and folks trying to get a collaborative solution.
So what happened last year? What did we learn from last year's lessons, I guess?
Basically, it was not ready. The language was not worked out properly. They didn't have the support. They tried this late in the year, and I think they didn't have enough time in the legislative year to actually work out a deal.
All right. I caution that we take a stance a little early on this. I think that if you have language that we need to provide, I agree. But I do wonder what the cost-benefit analysis looks like. And I assume that it's still too early to have one. And so I'm not saying that we shouldn't move forward with this, but I am wondering if it's too soon.
The only thing that I would add, Supervisor, is that the California Air Pollution Control Officers, which consists of all 35 air districts in the state, have taken a support position on this. So at least from an air
Okay.
quality perspective, there's broad support for this effort.
So I guess I'm just wondering then, where's the opposition? What was the opposition last year?
Well, I don't actually have all the specifics in terms of opposition. I know that this bill is focused on basically having enforcement applied equally. So I know that the truckers, for example, were working with the author to do it in a way, it rewards the folks that are doing the right thing and catches the folks that basically are trying to skirt the rules. My understanding also is that they're working with CARB as well as part of a multifaceted effort. So they're trying to do it in a collaborative way.
We can try to find that information for you, Supervisor.
What was the language that you wanted to work on once again? If you can just remind me once more.
I'm sorry.
The language that we're looking at. The clarification of the non-zero.
Yeah, basically clarification, the bill uses the phrase non-gasoline heavy-duty on-road motor vehicles. And technically that could include electric vehicles or zero-emission vehicles, so we want to clarify they wouldn't be involved in any kind of program. And the other point is basically there are penalty monies that would be generated potentially through this program. We wanted to suggest that that money be used directly for mitigating heavy-duty truck emissions by local air districts, or to help the air districts to do that direct issue.
So that goes back to the district in which the penalty originated. Right?
I see. All right. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this one? I will say that when I get reports at the CARB board meetings on enforcement, there are pretty consistently problems with enforcement. We see a lot of these trucks on the road that are belching smoke, and while CARB, there is a rule on opacity of the smoke emissions, there's no rules that govern smog and tailpipe emissions. We're working on that, but I think this would help the enforcement side of regulating these heavy duty trucks. And CARB won't take a position on it. They don't take positions on bills. But I have been supportive of this when it came up last year. I thought, yes, I wonder why we haven't done this before. So anyway, is there any further comments on this? Do we have any public comment on this?
None.
Okay.
Then I would just add, Madam Chair, if I may, I'll make the motion to approve this, knowing that the other air quality management districts are also supported as well, that we are also adding language that will benefit our district. I think that's important.
Okay, so is your motion to support and have our staff keep working with the author on the language we're concerned about?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
And is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
All right. Maybe have a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Buscaino,
Yes.
Supervisor Perez,
Aye.
Supervisor Rutherford,
Aye.
Mayor Mitchell.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you. And next we will hear a report on Assembly Bill 210, and this also from Philip Crabb.
Yes. So yeah, AB 210, this bill would exempt from the smog check program all motor vehicles manufactured prior to the 1983 model year. And this would be a change from current law that exempts vehicles prior to the 1976 model year. In the South Coast Air Basin, motor vehicles are a large source of emissions with almost 11 million cars in the region. Initial estimates identify nearly 40,000 vehicles within the South Coast region that would fall under the new smog check exemption proposed by this bill. You have older vehicles are some of the largest polluters as compared to the newer, cleaner, light-duty vehicles on the road today. The estimated impact of this bill for the current year is a potential emissions increase of about 2 tons of VOC emissions per day and 1 ton of NOx emissions per day within the South Coast. So this bill is in contrast to SCAQMD's policy priorities related to reducing criteria pollutants and air toxics within the South Coast from mobile sources, and would be contrary to efforts in terms of reaching attainment of federal air quality standards and reducing greenhouse gas emissions through the deployment of clean technology. So staff recommends an opposed position on this bill.
Any questions on this one?
Yes, I do.
Yes, Supervisor.
Janice.
Yes.
There's a current exemption. What year is that set at?
For vehicles prior to the 1976 model year.
And do we know if the member has some specific vehicles in mind or what his intentions are here?
Not specifically, however, as we move forward in the years, moving the exemption, the classic car exemption is kind of what it's called, to include, more recent vehicles is something that, I'm guessing would be meeting the constituents' needs or whatever the case may be. So we're not sure exactly why.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Philosophically, I object to cars that have been in my lifetime being called classic cars.
So I'm asking Matt to correct me, but my understanding is there's actually a change in technology so that the pre-76 vehicles really weren't suited to smog check. Is that correct?
They may be carbureted in pre-freeway catalyst.
We can't hear Matt.
I'm sorry, I think they had, that was before the three-way catalyst. So the smog check wouldn't really apply.
Did you hear that, Supervisor?
Not the first part.
This 1975 and older vehicles did not have the three-way catalyst, so the smog check doesn't really fit for those types of technologies.
So the point being that that rationale would not apply to the pre-1983 vehicles,
Right, so
which have been under smog check since then.
Any other comments?
Do we know what the rationale was? I think Supervisor Rutherford asked this question as well, but maybe I don't have clarity here. Do we know what the author, what's the motivation here?
We don't know.
Okay.
I would say potentially older vehicles, it's probably tougher to pass a smog check. You may have to make more repairs, so it would be a relief to those vehicle owners, but it would cause a negative air pollution impact.
Okay.
So any other comments on this, questions on this? Any public comment on this? And so I would look for a motion.
So move.
Second. Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Perez and a second by Councilman Buscaino. We have a roll call vote.
Councilmember Buscaino,
Yes.
Supervisor Perez,
Aye.
Supervisor Rutherford,
Aye.
Mayor Mitchell,
Yes.
motion passes 4-0.
And the next bill we have in front of us is AB 285. And we have our newest member of our legislative department, Denise Daly, will present on this. Good morning.
Good morning.
Go ahead, Denise.
Good morning. AB 285 is a bill by Assemblywoman.
Hold on real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Louder. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. AB 285, it's a bill by Assemblywoman Friedman. It's an author-sponsored bill and would require the Department of Transportation, or Caltrans, to address in the California Transportation Plan how the state will achieve maximum feasible emissions reductions in order to attain a statewide reduction of greenhouse gas emissions of 40% below 1990 levels by the end of 2030. The bill would also require Caltrans to complete an interim report by January 2022 that considers additional subject areas, including environmental justice and the movement of people and freight. The addition of environmental justice to the subject areas of the plan, it's our position that this is consistent with our environmental justice priorities and would help reduce toxic exposure to disadvantaged communities in the South Coast region. Our recommended position is that we work with the author to discuss that the bill require Caltrans to address how the state will achieve maximum feasible criteria pollutant emission reductions to attain state and federal ambient air quality standards by the upcoming federal deadlines. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, any questions on this one?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Supervisor Perez.
The only thing I would just caution is, I think that we have to think about what we mean by environmental justice or disadvantaged community and dig deeper. And the reason why I'm saying that is, just give you an example on cap and trade, for example. I live in an area where we have, and I'll be a little bit anecdotal here, but I live in an area where we definitely have disadvantaged communities. But I look at that from many different aspects. Not only, which I think poverty obviously should be looked at, and free and reduced lunch, for example, or education levels. But the cap and trade dollars that are being distributed throughout the state of California are not looking at that specifically. They're looking at density. They're looking at, I guess, the transportation, public transportation efforts that exist or don't exist in certain areas. And so out here in the eastern Coachella Valley, where we would have a high percentage of farm workers that average around $24,000 a year for a family of four, we unfortunately, because we don't have the population here like you do in LA, for example, or San Francisco or Fresno, we can't compete for those dollars. And so as we move forward here, when these type of conversations take place and we talk about environmental justice and disadvantaged community, I think that we need to really think about the entire air district, right? And not specific pockets where there's high density or high populations. Let's take a look at other criterias, such as poverty, so that we are also part of the language and we're not missing out on anything potentially in the future when it comes to this legislation. So I just want to put that out there as something for us to consider. I support it, but let's just make sure that we're thoughtful in our approach. And we're inclusive of the entire district.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. I think our staff can work with the author on how that is defined according to her bill. You know, CARB relies on the Cal screen, but there have been exceptions to or looking at that along with other factors. So, excuse me. Any other comments? Any public comment?
Harvey, did you want to comment on this? So this is number 5, the transportation.
This is right.
Yeah, yeah.
Hello, I'm Harvey Eder. I'm speaking for myself and for the Public Solar Power Coalition and like-minded folks that want to see equitable solar conversion as ASAP. These plans we've been working on, and we're trying to go ahead with manufacturing electric Class 8 trucks, and we're looking at by 23 trying to get at least 50,000 of them operating. So this plan should include that and equity and the work that we did with the PUC 40 years ago and what's going on now with equity at PUC and the CEC, etc. So and all these plans have to use real in the real, not this other stuff that we don't have 450 parts per million CO2 equivalent. We got like 900 right now, and but we're going down 40% from 1990 levels. That's like 250. So you got a delta of 500, 600, 700 in the real world.
Thank you, Mr. Etter. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll look for a motion on this particular bill, AB 285. The staff recommendation is to work with the author on this. Support and work with the author, I believe.
I second. I think I second. There was a motion already, I believe.
All right, so we have a motion from Councilman Buscaino, a second from Supervisor Perez. Is that correct? And a roll call, please.
Wait, hold on. Can we just get, Madam Chair, can we get clarification exactly what the recommendation was?
Yes, the motion maker, clarify.
Okay.
Recommendation?
Yes.
So staff's recommendation was to work with author.
Work with the author, correct.
Yeah.
Work with author, all right. So the motion is to work with the author, and a motion by Councilmember Buscaino and second by Supervisor Perez. May we have a vote? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Buscaino,
Aye.
Supervisor Perez,
Aye.
Supervisor Rutherford,
Aye.
Mayor Mitchell,
Aye.
motion passes 4-0.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have written reports. Those are information items. And is there any other business to come before the committee this morning? Seeing none,
I'm sorry, Madam Chair?
yes, Supervisor Rutherford.
I just wanted to add that I wasn't able to make the legislative committee trip with you all last week, but I did go with our county this week for National Association of Counties. I did have a meeting at the EPA with Carl Simon, the Director of Transportation and Climate, Caitlin Shimon, the White House liaison, Andrew Hansen from OCIR, a representative from Mr. Werman's office, and a variety of people from District 9 were on the phone. And we went through, I'm sure, the same issues that you all discussed when you were back there, but an emphasis on the CAFE standards issues and how that would play out for the business people of our area. And they didn't bring the $1 billion check with them. I asked for it, but they didn't have it on them at the time. But it was a good conversation, and there's certainly a group of folks who are interested in working with us.
Thank you, Supervisor. That's good news. Yeah, we're very excited that they're going to go ahead with the clean truck program that we filed a petition for in October of 2016. So thank you for your efforts as well in Washington and our behalf. And any other business to come before the committee?
Madam Chair, just a quick question. On AB 617, I understand there's going to be a hearing coming up within the next couple of weeks or so. Where is that hearing? And are we sending staff? I assume we are.
Yes, the hearing's in Sacramento. We will be sending staff, and my understanding is that members of the community have been invited by the committee. So there'll be the opportunity for those districts that have 617 communities to present. My understanding is that it'll be 3 minutes for each community per district. So, or is it 8 minutes? 8 minutes. So I'm sorry, we have 3 communities, so we have a total of 24 minutes to do the presentation. And there'll be a general discussion on the overall progress and the direction in which it's headed.
What days are that, and who's the chair? Remind me.
It's March 18th, and it's being done by the Assembly Natural Resources Committee, and Assemblymember Friedman is the chair of that committee.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other business? Is there any public comment in any of the locations?
You don't have to.
Well, hey, you know, there are folks who died for this, right?
All right.
And I knew some of them. Well, how much, I'm getting a minute?
Public comment.
Okay. I think that all legislation and all the rules and regulations of the district have to be done in light of the solar green New Deal and implementing it, there is efforts working on a state plan, and that this needs to be done as equitably, as quickly as possible, and that the apparently work that we did, you know, back in the first solar proceedings where the first equity issues were put out there, like OII 42 and the PUC from the late 70s to early mid 80s. You folks had that, you didn't do anything with it. You know, we were supposed to be having a solar group that worked, you know, came out of the plan with Dr. Burke. Trying to get stuff together and respond to what happened. There's the administrative committee on the 8th last month. I don't know. Like all these rules and everything, that there's the backsliding. They just go ad infinitum and repeating, and that's no good. So, but things are changing. Like with taking Congress and one of the Democrats. I feel like there's the expression, the wind at your back, but the your face up against the wall. In the old days, we used to say, up against the wall. They used to say to us. And, but it's better to be off the wall than up against it. Later.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. And that should conclude our meeting. Is there any other public comment? I believe that was the only one.
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And so our next meeting will be Friday, April 12th at 9 a.m. And this meeting is concluded. Thank you.
Thank you.